me start by thanking the African Prosperity Network for giving the private sector a voice. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement has set the tone. The presidents, indeed, the leaders of our continent, indeed, have created a path for us to follow through. And Africa, without a shadow of doubt, needs to act on this. 70% of intercontinental trade exists in the EU, 60% continental trade is in Asia. Indeed, they trade with themselves. And you have 50% of intracontinental trade in the US, which basically means that value is kept within those continents and value is not lost. Africa is 3% of global GDP. Accordingly, it is critical that we start to trade actively amongst ourselves. Unfortunately, colonial restrictions in the way our port systems are designed to export, colonial restrictions in the way our road and railways lead to ports for export as opposed to interconnect the continent have been a challenge for us. And infrastructure costs money. And accordingly, Africans have waited consistently for roads, railways, and port systems to be integrated in a way and manner to create trade. Now, infrastructure takes time and takes money. We don't have to wait for infrastructure to be taken. I think one of the key things the private sector seeks in its support from our leaders here present, as well as the leaders of the African Union, is the quick wins. The software can be dealt with. And the software includes very, very basic things like travel. We need to be able to move within the continent as business people. A foreign businessman with an EU passport or a US passport has better access to the 54 African nations than an African. I need a visa to go to Egypt. I need a visa to go to South Africa. I need a visa to go to over 50% of the countries that exist in Africa. Certainly, without a shadow of doubt, nations have made great steps. Ghana has made great steps in making access and travel easier. Rwanda has made great steps. Kenya and other countries. And there have been regional groupings like ECOWAS and SADC and COMISA who have allowed travel within their regions. It's time those barriers are broken, and those barriers need to be broken immediately. Similarly, ports and trade simplicity. Regulations regarding our goods and services need to be harmonized and harmonized quickly. I refer to the software because the software doesn't cost us money. It requires courage. It requires us dropping those hitherto restrictive and fearsome policies that have divided the continent towards saying now is the time to act. We need to be able to say our ports should be open, regulations should be simplified, and we should be able to move goods and services around the country. Other aspects in terms of which can be immediately affected is currency. We lose $5 billion a year on the continent converting our currencies. We have 44 different currencies on the continent. Intra-African trade will not be possible without us dealing with the issue of having a common currency or common systems of trade. And I must commend the African Export-Import Bank for the PAPS system, which has already been launched, but unfortunately is yet to be adopted by central banks and countries. Indeed, it's facing resistance. Nigeria, for example, where I come from, hasn't onboarded it as a means of currency. So the small and medium-scale entrepreneurs who need to trade between themselves, unfortunately, will have to convert from one local currency, usually, unfortunately, to an external currency, the dollar, before they convert back to the purchase currency of where they're going to buy goods and services. Once again, losing value to the another leakage to intercontinental trade. So that needs to be dealt with. We have digitalization to do. We've all created mobile phone systems across the country, across our continent, which work. It's time to unify some of these services so that we can actively trade between ourselves. The list goes on and on. But the point is that we do need to harmonize regulatory frameworks, standards, qualities, weights, and measures. And we've had similar things done at the regional stage in ECOWAS, with the Common External Tariff in COMISA and in SADC, but it's time that all these came together as one. Thereafter, of course, the next step will be our infrastructure. The infrastructure, and I'm really happy the last speaker spoke about public and private sector partnerships. Really, the fastest means of achieving the development of our infrastructure is through public and private sector partnerships. Great things are happening on the continent. The continent is creating substantial capacity amongst its private sector. I mean, in Nigeria, where I come from, we've become cement self-sufficient with local production. We've become rice self-sufficient. We've become, oil products. 35% of our country's oil production is now done by indigenous companies, and indigenous companies are creating scale. So whenever I hear stories of a multinational divesting, I don't see it as a challenge or a problem. I see it as an opportunity for African businesses to step up and participate. I say a big thank you for our leaders in giving us the chance to do that. Public-private sector partnerships will make a difference in terms of roads. Roads can be tolled, the private sector can get involved in ensuring that every single country is linked and the border crossings are prioritized, border crossings are digitalized, and we have free flow of trade that goes on. The same things will also happen in most other areas. For example, we've already started in the oil sector with the West African gas pipeline, where we've linked 7 countries and we are exchanging trade. The West African power project also has linked several countries in there. And I believe, without a shadow of doubt, allowing the private sector to participate truly allows capital flows to come in to an otherwise captive environment in which public sector financing has always been the source. And private sector financing also creates sustainability, because effectively what you do, what is financed is financing can be raised from global sources, and financing is raised with a return in mind. And what provides returns, future returns in funding, really gets long-term support. On that note, I say thank you to the conference conveners and our leaders here present, and we look forward to a very prosperous, integrated African continental free trade area.